June 19th. We begin our meetings with a Pledge of Allegiance, so if you would rise and join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Some housekeeping items. We do continue to support remote participation for the public, abutters, and members of the board. If we have any members of the board participating remotely, we shall do all votes by roll call. If you wish to attend this meeting electronically using a computer or smart device, visit www.zoom.us and enter the meeting ID 754-663-912. You may also call in on the phone for just audio participation, and the phone number there is 646-558-8656, and the same meeting ID 754-663-912. If you are joining by phone, you hit *9 to raise your hand to request to be recognized, and once recognized, hit *6 to unmute yourself for discussion. If there is an alarm activation, please use the emergency exit at the rear of the building, rear of the room. The elevators will not be operable, and so if you require assistance, please wait for first responders to provide that assistance to you. Please silence all of your electronic devices at this time. First item on the actual agenda is matters of escrow. Oh. Yeah, so do we have any, I want to introduce our new alternate, which I will do under introductions. Do we have any members absent tonight?
Yes, Richard Malaby will not be here tonight. Richard.
So I'll take care of that. So what'd you say, John?
You have to appoint somebody.
Oh, yeah. I will do that in a moment. I'm going to introduce the members and staff who are here tonight. Mr. Sioris, who's our planning director.
Good evening.
Ms. Wilson, who is our planning executive secretary. Ms. Carvello, who is our clerk, is at home, so I will be announcing the movers and seconders of motion to make her minute-taking remotely easier. The town administrator's representative, Mr. Chase.
Good evening.
Member, Mr. Healy.
Good evening.
Town council liaison, Mr. Grenice.
Good evening.
Our vice chairman, Mr. O'Connor.
Good evening.
We have Mr. Owen Preventure, who is from the cable TV. He's doing all the video magic tonight. Mr. LaRue, who is representing town's engineering department.
Good evening.
We have a new alternate, Brittany Lavoy, and we welcome you and thank you heartily.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And I would ask that you be seated for Richard Malaby this evening, who's absent.
Of course.
Okay? And we have Mr. Feinauer
Good evening.
and Mr. Fishman. Good evening. And we need to appoint a secretary pro tem. Who would like that honor in the absence of Mr. Malaby?
I can do it.
All right, so we will appoint Mr. Healy secretary pro tem for the evening. Thank you.
So he's scot-free.
No correspondence, so you're
Okay.
lucky.
That's easy.
First item of escrow is item number 24-17, JAL LLC, parcel ID 11058. Mr. Sioris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, as you indicated, the project name is Denali Estates Phase 2. This is up off of Daniel Road. JAL LLC is the developer. Tom and Steve Lannon. The escrow type is a performance bond. Again, the property is on Daniel Road. This is going to be a two-step process. So the first step would be to please release performance bond number 012212137, issued by Ohio Casualty Insurance Group in the amount of $561,660 for the above noted project. And then the second escrow will reestablish for this project with a new bond. So we have to do this one first, please.
All right, what is the board's pleasure?
I so move the action requested.
So move to release the performance bond number 01221237 as presented. Any discussion? So, actually, we need a seconder.
I'll second that.
So moved by O'Connor, second by Grenice. Since we don't have any roll members, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Bond is released.
Next one. Okay, same project again, Denali Estates, except this will be a new escrow for Phase 2 and 3. Again, JAL LLC, Tom and Steve Lannon on Daniel Road. Action requested, please establish performance bond number 012214651 issued by Ohio Casualty Insurance Company in the amount of $1,205,523.15 for the above noted project. It's signed by Mike Fowler, Mark LaRue, the treasurer, and myself.
Okay, what is the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I move to establish performance bond number 012214651 issued by Ohio Casualty Insurance Company in the amount of $1,205,523.15 for the above noted project.
Okay, moved by O'Connor,
Second.
seconded by Healy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions?
Okay, thank you. And then the last one, Mr. Chairman, for the new members, this is CHI overhead doors. This used to be the former movie cinema up on Ashley Drive. This is for the second phase of the project. The interior of the cinema, as you know, has been gutted, and the overhead door company's there. Phase 2 is for the eventual addition they want to put at some point. So this is to establish a new letter of credit. Again, number 9000002, issued by the Milliard Bank in the amount of $45,470.16 for the above noted project. And the expiration date will be June 7th, 2025. And again, it's been signed by Mike Fowler, Mark LaRue, Finance Department, and myself.
All right, what is the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chair, then I move to establish a revocable letter of credit number 9000002 issued by the Milliard Bank in the amount of $45,470.16 for the above noted project. The expiration date will be June 7th, 2025.
Second.
Moved by O'Connor,
Second.
seconded by Healy. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? It's approved unanimously. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have before us the minutes of June 5th, 2024. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And if so, have you noted any errors or omissions?
Mr. Chairman, no one coming forward with any corrections. Then I move to accept the June 5th, 2024 minutes of the planning board.
Moved by
Second.
O'Connor, seconded by Healy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll, excuse me, I'll abstain. I was not here.
Okay, Mr. Grenice has abstained. Everyone else is voting in favor. Next item on the agenda is correspondence, and I believe we have no correspondence in our folder, so we'll
There is none.
skip that. Next item is other business. We have a first extension request for Denali Estates Phase 3, parcel IDs 11058, 11058-008 through 11058-0112, 14013, and 14015, and Denali Estates Phase 4, parcel IDs 11057, 11057-017, and 11058-008, presented by JAL LLC.
Yeah, real quickly, Mr. Chairman, again, it's the project at Daniel Road that's under construction. As you saw in their letter, This was approved back on January 17th. They have met most of the conditions, but they're still working with the state and the New Hampshire DES to get some of the state permits. So they're asking for additional 6 months. Staff would recommend approval of both requests, and the approvals would be good until January 17th, 2025. And there's a motion on the back of the request letter on the back sheet.
Mr. Chairman, if no board members have any questions, then I'll make a motion to approve a 6-month extension of the conditional approvals granted on January 17th, 2024 to PIDs 11058, 11058-008 through 11058-012, 14013, and 14015, Phase 3, and PIDs 11057, 11057-017, and 11058-008, Phase 4. The new expiration date will be January 17, 2025.
Moved by O'Connor,
Second.
seconded by Healy. Is there any discussion? Now I will poll the board. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mr. Grenice?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Lavoy?
Yes.
Mr. Feinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Next item on the agenda is Planning Director and Chairman updates.
I have none other than we'll remind people, we have one meeting in July for the summer schedule. That is the 17th of July and then August 14th, and then going back to 2 meetings after Labor Day. So we'll send reminders out to everybody.
Okay, great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. We have a public hearing to discuss proposed changes to the Derry zoning ordinance, Article 7, to revise floodplain regulations.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make this brief, and then you can open up the public hearing for the record. But every decade or so, every 10 years, FEMA, these are our floodplain regulations for the new members, and FEMA does their review at the federal level, and they make recommendations sometimes to change maps or change some of the wording. So that they did this past year, and if you see the highlights in yellow and red, those are the changes that came directly from FEMA. The staff did not recommend any changes. They're mostly housekeeping. They're not substantial changes. It's more to look at definitions and some wordings. You have a memo from Bob Mackey, Code Enforcement Director. For the record, Bob enforces the zoning ordinance, and Bob wrote to the board that I have reviewed the amendments to the town's floodplain regulations, zoning ordinance Article 7, as proposed by the State Office of Planning and Development. The proposed amendments are editorial in nature and include some added or updated definitions and other minor edits. I would recommend these amendments be scheduled for a public hearing and adopted as proposed. I know one of our board members would like to make a change, but I think we open the public hearing first, and then we get input from the public, and then go close it, and then come back to the board.
Excellent. Can we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Moved by O'Connor, seconded by Healy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Public hearing is open. Any member who's in the room or online who has questions or comments, please come forward.
Seeing none rise online, Mr. Chair.
Seeing nobody coming forward, then I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved by O'Connor, seconded by Healy to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is closed. So now we are back to the board for questions and discussion. Mr. Chase.
So I just have one, actually one word that I would like to see changed under 165-58-4B, where it's talking about vehicles. It says they should be fully licensed, and in this state, a vehicle is registered, not licensed.
That's on the top of the page.
Yes, right on the top of the page, last page.
Is there any objection to that wording change? I think it's a
technical?
Scribner's change, a technical change, not substantial. Okay. So we will, without objection, make that amendment.
And just for the record, Randy had mentioned this to me, so I did check again with Bob Mackey. Bob said the same thing. The intent of that word change is not changing. He recommended that we put the word that Randy suggested. So if the board's happy that we do have a motion, this has to go to town council for their consideration with the planning board recommendation. And we have a motion for you on
So
the handout.
whoever wants to make the motion, just say proposed amendments as amended tonight, because we did make one change.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Seeing no further questions, did I make the motion to accept the proposed amendments to the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, Article 7, floodplain development district, as noted this evening, and move the amendment along with the amendment from the board this evening forward to town council for consideration and approval?
Moved by O'Connor,
Second.
seconded by Healy. Is there any discussion? Not, I will poll the board. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mr. Grenice?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes.
Mr. Weinauer?
Yes.
Mr. Fisherman?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, where's my agenda? So the next item on the agenda is a workshop to discuss the land development control regulations, specifically Section 170-31A, other utilities. I had noted at a previous meeting that had come up that we often, for small subdivisions, frontage lots in infill areas, we grant waivers. And the question was, why are we always granting waivers? So I thought it might be good to just look at the language and see if we could figure that out. So workshops are informal, so you have in front of you a copy of the language. So let's have some thoughts and discussion on this issue. Sure.
Yeah, and for the new members, it's section 17031, capital letter A on the handout. Just real quick, back in the 1990s, Eversource, which was public service back then, they came and made a presentation to the planning board because with all the it's gotten worse, but different snowstorms and power outages and trees and wires coming down, they came to the planning board and recommended that we could put underground utilities for the new development. So in theory, it's easier, obviously, when you see a brand new road being cut in, underground utilities, they have like a box, literally like a, you don't see the telephone poles anymore. And the thought process was if there was a power outage, in theory, you wouldn't lose the whole part of town or a neighborhood, maybe just focus in on that street to do the repairs. So the board adopted the wording from public service back then. Mark and I talked about this a little bit this morning. When you have a definition of a subdivision, it's a state statute, it says that any frontage lots, and we're seeing a lot of those lately, that's still by definition a subdivision. So when you see these one or two frontage lots, particularly in the older neighborhoods, the poles are already out there, so that's why we're getting the requests to not have the underground utility, particularly in the older part of town. So we really never thought about that back in the 90s. It was clear that, oh yeah, when the new road comes in with a new development, that's pretty clear and clean. So that's why some of this came up recently, and I think that's why we probably should talk about it, but that's some of the background of how it got in the regulations.
So I'll provide a personal anecdote that I think is related to this. There was a house built behind my next door neighbor, and according to the regulations, they had to have underground utilities, but the poles are on the opposite side of the street. So Eversource set another pole across the street, kind of in the neighbor's front yard, and they did the buried underground to the back of the property line, and then the transformer that sits on the little pad was kind of, on the abutter's property behind. And it seemed like we didn't actually get the intended effect because it created another pole in someone's front yard as opposed to hiding anything. So I'm thinking, it might make sense to talk about frontage lots, small numbers of frontage lots in infill subdivisions in neighborhoods that already have overhead. We tend to grant waivers sort of automatically for that. We can, either do nothing, leave it the way it is. We can accommodate those infill developments in language in the ordinance, or we can continue to grant waivers on a case-by-case basis. And it's really kind of up to what the board would like to do. Mr. Chase?
So I can give some insight on, how far back was the new house set from the street?
Well, it was set back from the property line, and it was behind the existing lot. So it was
Yeah.
kind of a lollipop lot.
So I can tell you, and Mark will probably back me up on this, Eversource, if you build a house more than 50 feet, I believe it is, from the right-of-way, they automatically put a pole in and make you put it underground.
It's even less than that.
Yeah, I've run across that multiple times, that's not our ordinance that caused that. That's Eversource themselves. They will not string an overhead service line to your house. They will put a pole in your front yard and make you bury it, or they will not give you electricity. That's Eversource, not our ordinance.
But our ordinance goes further, right?
No.
No.
Our ordinance had the intent of what George said, for if a new street is coming in, a whole new subdivision, to keep the utilities
Right.
underground to prevent that. What happened to your neighbor and what's happening around town is Eversource has taken it upon themselves to say, nope, we're not going to give you an overhead connection above, I thought it was 50 feet, it may very well be less. You will put a pole across the street in your front lawn, and then you will go underground to your house. That has nothing to do with our ordinance. That's their policy, and they will not deviate.
I would add that they do insist on a drop pole regardless of distance. Even if there's a pole that's nearby, they will put an additional pole for a drop because they don't want to overload a pole for a drop, especially if it has a transformer on it already. That's their policy. I've argued round and round for many years, and the whole point of this is to try to reduce pole pollution, if you will, but they're adamant about setting a drop pole on these
So anytime
properties.
there's a frontage lot where the poles are already on the other side of the street, there's an additional pole put in today.
Even on the same side, even if it's on the same side, the electrical main is on the same side, they will install a midline pole for a drop,
Regardless of how.
regardless.
The length of the drop. Wow.
Yep.
That seems interesting. I'll use
So
that word.
that has nothing to do with our ordinance, so changing our ordinance really won't change that at
Right.
all. The only thing that our waivers give them is the opportunity to not have to dig up the street, to start the underground, say their house is being built on the opposite side of the main lines. They would have to put a drop there and then dig across the street. And this waiver affords them the opportunity to just have a drop pole put in on their side and then run their underground utilities. It just saves them digging up the street.
So I have a quick question. So several months ago, there was a package that we got from a subdivision down on Island Pond Road towards the other end. Oh, sorry. So several months ago, we approved a subdivision down on Island Pond Road, closer to the 111 side, and there was, I believe, memory serves, there was a waiver request for not burying lines, and it was poles. So even though, if I'm accurate, which I'm sure I am, I have the paperwork at home, public service would still, or Eversource would still require that those lines be buried, even though we approved a waiver on that?
Correct. So what could be done is it could be overhead across the street so as not to dig up Island Pond Road, but they will still insist on a drop pole on the house side of Island Pond Road, and then they will have to put their drops in and bury the lines to the house.
Okay.
Because I remember we had a waiver request on the Doolittle subdivision fairly recently, similar argumentation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And that's where the waivers come in good, is so that we allow them to go with the drop pole option rather than digging up the street and having their drop on that main line side.
Okay. Mr. O'Connell?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just part of this being minutia, just that when we come to a conclusion to whatever we come up with, is that we deal with a good, clean document. Right now, we're talking about section 170.31, other utilities. But we also have section 170-66, same thing, other utilities. All proposed on-site utilities, electric, telephone, cable, TV, et cetera, shall be installed underground in accordance, blah, 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 goes on. So whatever we come up with, we either gotta remove this, add to it, or put it in tiers, just to make sure we have a clean document.
So you're saying we've got the same requirements in multiple
And
sections?
they're different, yeah, there's 4 different sections, actually, that it's in here.
Okay, so,
You can of worms.
so I have a new understanding that what we're waiving, according to everyone who's spoken, is the requirement to dig up the public street. But public service will still require a buried service up to the house from a pole somewhere.
I don't, that doesn't sound clear to me. I'm under the impression that they are okay either way if you go overhead or underground. Our regulation on both sections of the LDCR states underground. And it's really, I don't think it's a problem with section 170-66 because this is a site plan portion. So the commercial buildings and the multifamily, they're typically clustered and all the utilities are laid underground to begin with. So I don't see that needing any edits in my opinion. The difficulty is the subdivisions. It's clear with this regulation, it was intended for roads with new roads with multiple lot subdivisions. So it's easier to mandate the underground. What we're having now is any vacant property or any larger properties that can be split. The requirement still applies to them, but there's so many other circumstances with some of these lots. Some of them are in dense, more densely populated or smaller lot areas where everything's overhead. So it would be nothing to just extend a line from an existing pole that's already feeding 3 other homes. Then you have these small subdivisions that are out in East Erie where the lots are still 2 and 3 acres and larger. Now, those are more expansive lots. People want a longer driveway. It makes sense that they should stay underground for the purpose of not having to lose power in the wintertime and being the last service on the line because it's an individual unit. And if a tree is more likely to disrupt a service, it's a long driveway through a wooded lot. So there's so many other variables that we have to consider with this. Maybe the waiver portion is the best way. I think, we can kind of toss it around. So we talked about it earlier today, George and I, and that's the problem. If you go into different densities, it's probably better to be underground out in East Erie. If you're in the internal, compact zone, it's better to just go off a pole. There's no point in to just dropping underground if you're going to be putting 30, 40, 50 feet of underground conduit. You're still going to have an extra pole. It's better to just keep everything consistent in that regard.
So what would your recommendation be, to make changes or to simply grant waivers when they're warranted and not feel bad about it?
You could look at different zones, low, medium residential, high, high densities, looking at land parcels, parts of town that way, as far as lot sizing goes.
Yep.
That's one.
Yeah, there haven't been many new subdivision streets, other than like Denali Estates was probably the last one I remember.
Yeah, JL.
And I think the intent of the waivers is where it's a frontage lot and it really doesn't make sense. So, other members who have thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say leave everything the way it is. I concur with Mark on everything. But my thing is always less is best. And I think if you start putting in, if you have a 1,000 square foot lot versus a 5,000 square foot lot, you can have overhead and underground. I think if you start putting more wording in there, I think it'd just be more confusing. I like the idea of, it's in there, if they want the waiver, they can get the waiver. You know, we've always been accommodating to developers and people doing stuff, so I see no problem granting the waivers.
Okay, and other thoughts on that? Preferences? Mr. Healy?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should probably just leave it the way it is. I would like to see when we grant the waivers, though, just a little more reasoning, a little backup, instead of just kind of, we seem to run through them pretty quick. We're granting the underground waiver, or, yeah, the waiver for overhead, and they don't really provide much of an explanation as to why. So maybe just a little bit more time on the reason we're actually granting the waiver. But I think individually, looking at it each time, it isn't too much on us. So I'd probably just leave it as is.
Mr. Fishman, do you have a comment?
No, but I concur.
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing is a rough consensus is that we just leave it the way it is, and we grant waivers when they're warranted, and we don't feel that we're issuing waivers inappropriately because we do a large number of them, and that really is because we have a large number of subdivisions, small subdivisions where that applies. Is that what I'm hearing from everyone?
And we can do our part in the TRC meetings and approach that with a little bit more detail as far as discussions with the owner or applicant to see, you know, what's the best way to bring power to, you know, the particular project at that time.
Okay, so I guess we don't really need a formal motion to change anything, because I think our consensus
No,
is just leave it alone and deal with it through individual waivers.
Yeah, no, I agree with the board, Dan, too, and, yeah, we'll, like Mark said, we'll chat it up a little bit more at the TRCs to give more wording, not just one sentence, and, no, we're happy with it. I mean, Mark and I talked about it. My personal feeling was to leave it as it is, because you really, until you get out, like Mark said, the town, unfortunately, when we had that fire a couple of months ago down on Goodyear Road, and unfortunately, when the woman passed away, the building inspector and I took a ride down there that afternoon, and the road was closed off. This is like near 111 Island Pond. And to go on Big Island Pond Road and seeing all the amount of trees that were down and those back roads out there, it was amazing. And then we saw certain houses had lights on, some did not. And it was just amazing to see the difference. And until you get in those back roads, I think the board's right, do it case by case, because you can't blanket the whole east area. It's just too many curvy, windy roads, and they're all different, so.
Okay.
And also, Mr. Chair, typically, a lot of this will be dealt with in TRC before it even gets to us.
Well, the TRC can't grant waivers, though.
No, they can't. They can recommend,
Yeah.
and then we can read it for our homework.
All right. I think we've closed on that. Any general board member comments? Mr. Grenies?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to, in case anybody doesn't know, I just want to recognize Mr. George Cioris. I believe it was a week ago Friday. George was presented with the Jeff Taylor Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual Planners Conference in Keene. So I just want to say congratulations, George. So.
Thank you, David, thank you.
Yes, extremely well-deserved. And I'm probably dating myself, but who here actually remembers Jeff Taylor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, the board. Yeah, Jeff Taylor was, he was the state planning director at New Hampshire Planning Office back then for many, many years. And then he was a city planner in Concord, I think Berlin, New Hampshire. So Jeff then became a consultant in the private sector, and he helped communities. So back in the 90s, we actually hired Jeff to do some master plan work for us. So I personally knew him. He's considered like the guru of planning at the state. So they made an award in his honor. So, you know, I appreciate it was a surprise to me on Friday when I went to Keene for the conference. So I appreciate that, and thank you. It's been a great planning board over the years. Really, the town council, the administration's been supportive. So really, it's a team effort here because everybody had to help each other. So it's just not me, and I appreciate the staff I have now and Liz in the past, and she'll be coming back. So and Mark as well, and Public Works. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, any other comments?
I have one other one. Well, two comments. Get ready for your roast, first of all. Second, and I spoke to Ms. Wilson, Caroline, earlier. I wasn't sure if it was a secret, but there was an email sent out to the board. I don't know if you guys got that email. So George, on June 25th, you're a speaker at the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, and he's going to speak about Exit 4, Derry Rail Trail, Master Plan, social media, and citizen participation, changes, zoning, land use, practices, and regulation for 40 years. So I'll be in attendance there. I RSVP'd. But for the, I believe the general public can go virtually, I believe, on that.
Yeah, it's the annual monthly, John, you remember that, John O'Connor. It's the monthly meeting they have, and they've asked me again to come in and speak about my experience as a planner, so
Yeah,
I'll
we're
be doing
short
that.
one person on that board, too.
yeah, we need some Derry reps, by the way. I know they meet once a month on a Tuesday in Manchester at 11:30. I know it's an off time, but if people have time, or
They feed you.
they give you sandwiches and lunch, right? Pizza.
All right, so we should make a general pitch for 2 more alternate positions,
Yes.
people to volunteer, and an additional person to represent Derry on the Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
So all those folks who would like to do a little bit of public service and have some fun, go to the town website and put your name in, please.
Okay. And
Any
Brittany
other
too. Brittany, there's a lot. We gave you a lot of stuff and books and master plans. Don't get overwhelmed, but you
I'm
know.
doing a lot of reading.
Yeah. So, and don't hesitate, Carolina, here, and to call the office or stop in or email us, and we can sit down with you and go through stuff too. So,
Everybody's been fantastic.
okay,
Thank you.
great.
All right, any other
Thank you,
board
everybody.
member comments? If not, I'll fish for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I would say usually you.
Moved by Grenier, seconded by O'Connor to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Stand adjourned. Very good.